singing in the evening, all over this line. I'd sing out danger, I'd sing out a warning, I'd sing out love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this line. Ooh, well, I got a
Peter, Paul, and Mary, if I had a hammer. Mary Travers died last night at the age of 72 in Connecticut. But of course, her music will live on. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
Well, a year ago this week, Lehman Brothers collapsed. Wall Street fell into a state of panic as it became evident that the nation was suffering its worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. A year later, little seems to have changed on Wall Street. Goldman Sachs is preparing to hand out high bonuses again this year. The 30,000 employees at the investment bank will take home, on average, $700,000 this year. Just yesterday, the Bloomberg News Agency reported credit default swaps have lost their stigma on Wall Street, even though it was this type of risky bet that led to the financial crisis just a year ago. While Wall Street appears to be recovering from the crisis, Main Street has not. The official unemployment rate is expected to top 10% this year. In Michigan, it's at already above 15%. In Philadelphia, the city is threatening to shut down its public library system in early October. In California, hundreds of faculty, students, and staff on the University of California's 10 campuses have called for a system-wide walkout next Thursday to protest the university's handling of its budget crisis. Cities and states across the country are cutting back on essential services.
For the rest of the hour, we're joined by two guests who for decades have advocated for a radical rethinking of how the nation's economy is structured. Grace Lee Boggs is with us right now, philosopher, activist, just celebrated her 94th birthday, big parties in Detroit and in Chicago. She was born in 1915 to Chinese immigrant parents. For the past 7 decades, she's been involved with civil rights, black power, labor, environmental justice, and feminist movements. Her autobiography, Living for Change, was published in 1998. Monthly Review Press has just republished 2 books by her late husband, Jimmy Boggs, with new introductions written by Grace. We're also joined by John Bellamy Foster. He is editor of the Socialist journal Monthly Review and professor of sociology at the University of Oregon. He's the author of several books, including The Great Financial Crisis and the Ecological Evolution, Making Peace with the Planet. Both Grace Lee Boggs and John Bellamy Foster are speaking tonight at the New York Society for Ethical Culture at an event to mark the 60th anniversary of the Monthly Review. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! In a time of, well, you might say great crisis and also opportunity. Grace Lee Boggs, how would you describe where we stand now and how we've gotten here?
Well, I think we're in a time of great hope and great danger. I think that the danger is largely underestimated. I think that at a time when thousands of people descend on Washington saying we want our country back and denouncing Obama as a socialist, that it's become very important for us not to talk about recovery, but to talk about how do we create a new society of hope. And I think that's why Monthly Review is so important, because it's been, for 6 years, trying to create an independent approach to socialism that is not bogged down in ideas that come from the 19th century or from the 1917 revolution. And I think that the only answer to the counter-revolution, which Bertha Lewis and others are trying to defend ourselves against, is to begin creating a new concept of hope, not to talk about recovery. We don't need to go back to a society that is concentrated on economic growth, that dehumanizes us, that makes us consumers only, and is threatening all life on this planet. We need to be thinking about something new, and we need to have a deeper appreciation of what the witch hunts that are taking place from Van Jones and Bertha Lewis, and to understand that these are taking place at a time of great danger to the powers that be. That the powers that be have lost 2 wars, that the situation is much more comparable to that of Germany in the 30s than to anything that the American people have experienced up to now.
And when you say a new society of hope, how do you distinguish that from, let's say, the movement that brought President Obama to power, which is talking about change? Is the difference between change now that it's being attempted versus your vision of a society of hope?
Well, I think it's fortunate that we have Obama in power, not because he's going to do very much. I think the contradiction between his rhetoric and his practice is very profound. I think it's very tied into his personality. But what he does is, by virtue of his actually in the White House carrying on the policies, essentially, of the previous administration, especially with regard to war, is that he's forcing us really to go beyond him, to understand his limitations. He's in a sense, he's an opportunity. He's also a danger, as every crisis is.
And John Bellamy Foster, your analysis of what's happening now and where your publication, Monthly Review, fits in.
Well, in terms of the economic crisis, I think our analysis is that the usual way of looking at things is upside down. And we're told that the whole problem is the financial crisis. And if that's fixed, then the problem will be solved. And the bailout will trickle down to the rest of the population. But our argument is, and it has been for a long time, that the basic economy, the real economy or production, is slowing down. And there are reasons for this that are complex. But the U.S. economic growth rate has been slowing down. It was slower in the 1970s and the 1960s, slower than in the 1980s and 90s than in the 1970s, and slower in the 2000s up till 2007 than in the 1990s. The rate of growth has been slowing down, and that now we've actually plummeted. So this is the worst decade in economic growth since the 1930s. But each one since the 1960s has been basically slower than the one before. So the basic economy is slowing down, and they've used finance as a way of stimulating it through these bubbles. And yet this is very destructive. And the real problems then have to do with production, with the ordinary economy, with the way distribution is carried out. Real wages in this country in 2007 were at the same level as 1967 when Lyndon Johnson was president. Profits have gone up, as we know, wealth has gone up, but real wages were at the level of 1967. You have a situation where 1% of the population, 1% of the wealth holders own twice as much as the bottom 80% of the population. So there are problems in terms of distribution, in terms of the structuring of the underlying production, and this is built into the system. And believe it or not, the financial bubbles were a kind of solution to keep the system going. But it's like a drug addiction. You need bigger and bigger doses to keep it going. Now the only real solution to the problem they have now, their solution is to bail out finance. And so far we've committed in the United States, as of early 2009, we committed $12 million. The federal government, in one way or another, committed, I mean, not 12 million, I'm sorry, $12 trillion in various forms of cash, capital infusions, debt subsidies, loans, and so on to the financial institution. $12 trillion.